Hi guys, and welcome to Gaz's Aviation. This is video 2 of my Teng L39 build. I hope you remember from the last video that we did that we were building the tailplane and vertical stabilizer. They're both finished, and as you can see now are on the aircraft with the cover plate glued back in place. Here's the vertical stabilizer. Looks very smart, and as you can remember, the cutouts that I'd done on the bottom of the aircraft for the vertical stabilizer, for the elevator to fit into on both sides of the airframe, here and obviously on here, and you can see that they look pretty smart. Inside the airframe is where the wires come out of the servos and head up the tunnel past the turbine. So that's where we were up to last time, but that's it all on the aircraft, which looks pretty smart now as it's progressing nicely. Okay, today we are on to the aileron and flap servos. This is a side I've already finished, and as you can see, the linkages are on, control horns are on, and the plate is in place. Obviously the first thing you want to do when you are working out where you're going to put your ailerons, but I've already done it for you, and flaps, is to have a look at where you need to put the servos to work out where you need to put the control horns. Once you've worked out where you're going to put your servos, then you can work out where to put the control horns, because it depends on obviously on where the servos are as to where the horns are going to be. So once I'd done that, then I worked out where the horns had to be, and with the aid of a Dremel I milled a nice little slot in both of these things here and installed them, and then I epoxied them in, and we worked from there. Now on this side, at great expense to myself, I've removed the controls on this side, and I've taken the plate out so that you can see how I've mounted my servos. And as you can see, what I've done is I've mounted my flap servo and my aileron servo on this removable plate. Now the way that I've worked it out to be most functional is to set my flap servo as close to this edge as possible, and then mount the aileron servo with a little bit of clearance to give me some room. But to make it simpler, because they were such a squeeze in there, I've actually done a little bit of a cutout here just to the left hand side of this wing cutout, and what that's done is that's given me a little bit more room with the servos to set them up. So anyway, as you can see, that's the servo setup. It's pretty simple. Rather than build the towers in here like I did with the elevator and vertical stabilizer, is I thought that because this is quite a thick area here, this is nearly 35mm through from there to there, so rather than have a big 35mm narrow skinny post which would not be very strong, I decided to epoxy them to the bottom of these plates. So to strengthen these plates, which are a thin layer of fiberglass that are painted with some ply on the bottom, is I epoxied them. I painted these plates with epoxy to make them as strong as houses, and they really are very stiff and very strong now. So once I had done that, then I put my servos in place in line, worked out where the centre of both of my throws were going to be, and then I mounted these in position like that. Nice and easy, nice and simple. Very strong. I screwed in behind here this stiffener and this stiffener that this plate screws down to. This is just a cutout that this plate fits into. I have put this plate and this plate in, which are made of 3mm basswood, and I have painted them with epoxy once I've drilled the holes to make them nice and strong, and then I've epoxied them and clamped them in place under the wing on both sides to give me a nice strong structural point for my control surfaces to push off. because if they didn't have a nice strong surface to push off, obviously the airframe wouldn't be that strong. So that's what I've done there. The other thing you'll find with these things too is, and in hindsight it would have been smart, I reckon, if I'd actually turned this control horn here around, and rather than had it leaning up and forward like that, to have it leaning up and to the back in this direction out here, because as this flap goes on to full stroke, you lose fulcrum through the top of this point here, which makes the servo work a lot harder. If I had to put the servo horn back the other way, as it was coming onto maximum load, which is what you do when you put the thing on maximum load, when you say I need full flaps, I'm coming in for landing, it would make the work for the servo a lot easier, because I would have reduced the fulcrum on it. So once again, something in hindsight. We learn these things as we go when we're building. The next thing we're up to now, oh by the way, that's this side, all screwed in place and finished, strong as houses. I've tested it and hung on it with my hands, and it pulls the wing out of my hands, so it's as strong as houses. Very, very good. I'm very happy with it. Once again, as I said in the last video, I'm using Ternigi MG 555, sorry, not MGs, they're Ternigi 555 thin wing servos, and they work really, really well. I've got them, as I said, in a hotliner, and I've been pretty happy with their performance so far, and most of the other stuff I've read says they're pretty good. Okay, on to the main wing retracts, which are here and here. I've left one out and I've got one in. It's not screwed in place, but just showing you what I've done. You'll see I've got this green tape around here. I put this tape on to protect the paintwork on the aircraft from my messy fingers. If you get epoxy and stuff on this lovely finished paintwork and you don't get it off immediately, it'll mess it. It'll make a mess of it. It'll ruin it. So I use a good quality spray painter's masking tape. Don't use cheap crap, because if you use cheap crap, particularly the white stuff that you see in most supermarkets and hardware stores, and you stick it down, you leave it there for any more than 24 hours, and when you pull it off, the whole plane will be covered in this sticky crap, and you can't clean it off for love nor money. You buy the good quality stuff, yeah, it costs twice as much, so instead of paying $2.50 for a roll, you'll pay $5 or $6 for the masking tape. But the $5 or $6 roll, you can pull it off after a week or two, and there'll be absolutely no residue left on the airframe here at all that you've got to clean off, because that's what it's designed for. So anyway, that's just something that I do. What I've done here with my retracts, and I'm using E-flite retracts, these nice little guys right here, very, very good quality, very, very sturdy electric retracts, is what I did was I actually mounted them to this front block here first. I worked out where I had to sit them, and I just drew around it with a pen, with that squeezed over into this corner, because if you look in here, we've got a frame in here, and we've also got a frame over behind it. So I pushed that into the corner, then I sat this in position, marked the holes, pulled it out, drilled it and screwed it in place. So that's where that needs to be. Once I did that, I then epoxied this block into place on both sides, did both sides at the same time, and then I pulled that out. Then I worked out where this one had to go, and I put this back in position after I put this in and epoxied it in place, and then I squeezed this block against that block with a screwdriver, and with the aid of some leverage onto the epoxy that I had previously put in, to make sure that that was a super tight fit. And as you can see, that's very, very hard to get in there, and that has absolutely no play in it whatsoever. When I put the screws in there, and what I always do too when I drill my holes for my screws, is I actually put a splash of CA down through the guts of them. Very, very thin CA strengthens it all up and increases the strength of your bond, and will stop that little screw from ever pulling out of there, especially if you're a ham-fisted bugger and you try and over-tighten the thing. So that's the main retracts, as you can see. It's all progressing nicely. The next video I'll show you the completed retracts, and we'll go on to the retract in the front of the aircraft as well as the electrical installation and the turbine installation. I'm running a Teng L39 in this. That goes in here, and when we get all that sorted, when I get the framework installed for the L39 for the Teng, we'll continue on with this video. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.